Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Natsukashi, Writings on the Nisei Experience. My name is Melissa Bailey Nihei, and I am Program Development Associate with the National Japanese American Historical Society. I'd like to introduce our partners on this program, starting with Diane Curry, Executive Director and Curator of the Hayward Area Historical Society, followed by Rosalind Tonai, Executive Director of the National Japanese American Historical Society, and Naomi Shibata, author and coordinator of a number of Nisei writing workshops, one of which we are lucky enough to share selections from with you all today. After our video presentation with the authors, we will have a question and answer session with two of them, Talk Kato and Kicks Kato. Please put your questions in the chat during the program and we will get to them at the end. Without further ado, let me introduce Diane Curry.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Diane Curry. I'm the Executive Director of the Hayward Area Historical Society. We are so pleased to partner with the National Japanese American Historical Society on today's program. We welcome you all to today's program. I met these authors several years ago when they generously gave their time to help develop the exhibition Loyal Americans, Japanese American Incarceration During World War II. They shared some of their experiences and taught me so much about this time in history and its lasting impact. Though I heard many of their stories, really that was just the tip of the iceberg. With the help of author and historian Naomi Shibata, they have crafted some truly moving stories to help illustrate the lasting impact of incarceration and the war's aftermath. Many of their stories are connected in some way to the Hayward area, which makes them particularly relevant to our institution. These stories will make you think, maybe move you to a tear or two, because they did to me. One of the things I hope you walk away with is incentive to write your own stories down so that the next generation can learn from your experiences, whatever those experiences may be. Thank you to Digger, Ta, Kix, and Naomi for working so hard and sharing your stories with us all today. I'm going to introduce Rosalind Tonai, the Executive Director of the National Japanese American Historical Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Hi, I'm Rosalind Tonai, Executive Director of the National Japanese American Historical Society. In this special collaboration with the Hayward Area Historical Society, I'd like to join my colleague in welcoming everyone to Natsukashi, Writings on the Nisei Experience. You know, several years back, after successfully completing her mother, Grace Eto Shibata's memoirs and short stories, Naomi Shibata floated the idea to me about conducting a series of writing workshops for Nisei seniors to get them to put pen to paper, sharing their stories of their experiences growing up. She was challenged by working with people who had never published and perhaps never shared their stories publicly or even privately. By using her patience, persistence, charm, and cajoling, she began conducting a series of short-term workshops, working primarily with Nisei. Natsukashi refers to something that evokes a fond memory, a nostalgic longing to be close to something. So it is befitting in celebrating Asian Pacific Heritage Month in the Historical Society's 40th anniversary, emerging out of this pandemic, that we allow ourselves to reminisce in the comforts of our home, the pleasant memories that bring us warmth, humor, and appreciation for all that life has to offer. And today, author, editor of Bend with the Wind, The Life, Family, and Writings of Grace Eto Shibata, contributing editor to our Nikkei Heritage, our occasional gallery docent at the MIS Historic Learning Center, and teacher Naomi Shibata, presents these stories, which I hope will inspire and leave you with a sense that everything will be all right. Without further ado, Naomi Shibata.
Thank you, Rosalind and Diane, for your very kind words. Welcome, everyone. Today, my friends and I are going to take you on a journey back in time. We will stop in the Pacific Northwest of the 1930s, as well as the Utah Desert, the Northern California lava basins, and the San Francisco Bay Area of the 1940s and 1950s. Guiding us are three Nisei, second-generation Americans of Japanese descent, ages 79, 84, and 90. These first-time writers will share accounts of their lives before, during, and after World War II. Their stories communicate the enduring powers of family, community, acts of kindness, and resilience. The writers describe a time when Japanese immigrants and their American-born children, as loyal contributing members of society, were wrongfully accused of disloyalty. They describe sudden upheaval and catastrophic loss, new beginnings, and a country willing to apologize for its mistakes. They describe times during which our citizens showed themselves at their worst and at their best. Over the years, I've shared the Nisei narrative with many individuals, including 1,000 seventh grade students. Here are a few of the student responses to my question, what did you take away from our time together? I learned to be proud of who I am, no matter what the situation. Do not let anything hold you back from pursuing your dreams. Make the best out of the worst. I should bend with the wind and not let it break me. What I remember most are the stories you told us. I absolutely love them. Storytelling is a powerful way to bridge generations and cultures. To quote a friend, Professor Emeritus of History, Dr. Daniel Krieger, we who live in the present are not the first to encounter difficulties and crises. Others have traveled troubled paths before us and survived with dignity and grace. And now I would like to introduce three individuals who have not only survived, but thrived with dignity and grace. It is my very great privilege to introduce Nisei storytellers Takeo Kato, Kix Kato, and Digger Sasaki.
Dr. George, if I were asked to name the most influential people in my life, my childhood dentist, Dr. George Yamamoto, would be high on the list. This story begins in the fall of 1945, when I was 8 years old. World War II just ended, and my family was released from an incarceration camp that held 8,000 individuals of Japanese descent in the Utah desert. My parents, 2 sisters, 4 brothers, and I returned to rebuild our lives in the rural community of San Lorenzo in California's San Francisco Bay Area. My life was carefree until my neglected teeth began to trouble me, and I was introduced to the only Japanese American dentist in the area, Dr. George Yamamoto. Dr. George's upstairs office was on San Leandro's north side at the corner of East 14th and Dutton Avenue. Dr. George was a quiet man with a crew cut who wore smartly tailored, neatly pressed white uniform that buttoned down the side. He spoke so softly one had to lean in to hear him. He did not waste words. His speech was slow, clear, and concise. During my first visit, it was obvious I was in deep dental trouble. With the utmost patience, Dr. George knelt next to me and told me we would be seeing quite a bit of each other. At the end of one especially stressful appointment, I tried to stand, nearly fainted. I was taken to Dr. George's office to rest on the couch. Just as I recovered, the doctor walked in and sat at his desk. I thought he was to check on me, but instead he asked me to take a chair across from him. With his eyes intently focused on me, he spoke in his soft voice and asked what my plans were for the rest of my life. I was a kid in elementary school, I had no answer. Dr. George leaned back in his chair and slowly but clearly laid out an education blueprint that included college. I listened. I enrolled in college in 1955 and had the privilege to play football. I was a 185-pound lineman trained to hit and control the player in front of me. One technique was the spear and rip. A player charges, plants his helmet in the opponent's chest just under the jaw, and quickly rises, rolling the opponent back. When done properly, coaches applauded. But being on the receiving end, the result can be jarring and painful. In those early days, we played without masks and mouth guards, and this maneuver often resulted in cracked or lost teeth. After the freshman season, I went for my dental exam. Dr. George was surprised to find several broken molars. I told him I played football and was ripped more times than I could remember. The doctor was not pleased with how I abused my teeth, but he was pleased to see how once a rudderless kid worked hard, stuck to his education plan, and was realizing his potential. Dr. George passed away many years ago. If given the opportunity, I would thank him for that brief but unforgettable conversation in his office. His interest in me guided me first to college and later to a satisfying 35-year career in education. I was inspired to work as both a teacher and a school principal with some of the most disadvantaged children in our community. Wherever Dr. George is, I am sure he is pleased to hear this story. A dream was fulfilled not just for the boy, but also for the good doctor.
My Jack Kramer racket. In the summer of 1958, I was a shy high school junior trying to figure out how to earn enough money to buy a new tennis racket. I was just named to the varsity tennis team, and I was flat broke. As the youngest of 7 children, I had no intention of asking my father to buy a racket for me. Pop had a large family to support, and I was certainly old enough to find work. My father was the carpentry foreman for San Lorenzo Nursery Company. The nursery owner was also my pastor at the San Lorenzo Holiness Church, Reverend Dan Shinoda. It took me a long time to get the nerve to ask Reverend Dan for a summer job. I was very nervous, but I hoped my devotion to my faith would be a good character reference, and I guess it was. Reverend Dan put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm going to give you a job, and I'll pay you 6 bits an hour." I was elated. On my first day, Reverend Dan put a long-handled hoe in my hand and showed me the waist-high weeds growing close to the glass greenhouses. My job was to cut the weeds down so they would not block the light. I was also careful not to break the glass panes, as my father would have to replace them. The summer days were hot and dry. I developed hay fever, and I sneezed all day long. At lunchtime, I sharpened my hoe with a large metal file. One day, I sliced my thumb on a sharp edge. I ran to the secretary's office, and she poured mercurochrome all over it. I about fainted. Dan came to ask if I was okay, and I lied because I did not want to lose my job. Dan asked if I could drive, and luckily my brother Talk had taught me. My job was then to drive around the nursery in a doorless pickup truck loaded with water-filled half wine barrels. I picked up gladiolas, roses, carnations, and gardenias, and I delivered them to the packing shed. Once my hand healed, I joined another work crew. One of our jobs was to pull out the old rose bushes, to prepare the soil, and to plant new bushes. On tear out day, we wore long sleeve shirts, long gloves, and grabbed burlap sacks to pull out armloads of super thorny rose bushes. No matter how much protection we wore, we always got stuck. I worked with some tough guys, two brothers, Roy and Fred. They opened their Coke bottles with their teeth. When it came time to prepare the soil, we dug 50-foot trenches, laid down steam pipes to sterilize the soil. Everyone raced to see who could dig their trench the fastest. I never won. That was the hardest job I ever had, and I quit after that one summer. With my earnings, I bought new clothes and shoes. As the youngest of 5 boys, I always wore hand-me-downs. But my most important purchase was my Jack Kramer tennis racket. My brother Hideo drove me to the George Rice tennis shop in Oakland, and I chose the most expensive racket, and I had braided catgut strings inserted. George strung that racket. He engraved my name on the handle, and he gave me a head cover. I held that prize in my arms all the way home. That racket was special for so many reasons. It was purchased with the money I earned. It also led to my success as a college player, and I became a key member of the 1965 Far Western Conference championship team.
I was born in 1930 in the little town of Enumclaw, Washington, population 2,000. My parents, 2 sisters, and I lived in a small Japanese colony in the foothills halfway between Seattle and Mount Rainier across Highway 410 from the White River Lumber Company sawmill. Most of the adults worked for the lumber company. 8 families had their own homes, and 3 dozen men lived in a bunkhouse. There was only one other primary schooler living in the colony, a little girl named Margaret, and we were good friends. My father worked at the sawmill, and Mother was the bunkhouse cook. Mother's Day started at 4 a.m., and sometimes I rode my tricycle in the mess hall while Mother cleaned up after meal times. I spent my days playing with other school children and occasionally got into mischief. One day, we decided to cut Margaret's hair, and I was the barber. I remember my parents later apologizing to Margaret's family. Another time, we roughhoused in the log pond, and I nearly drowned. I woke up as I was being rolled over a barrel to expel water from my lungs. In 1937, my grandparents decided to retire, and Mother agreed to run their laundry. Mother, my sisters, and I moved 25 miles away to Auburn. My father continued to work in Enumclaw and commuted on slow country roads to join us each weekend. We lived behind the laundry and slept upstairs. I was 11 years old in December 1941 when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and the United States entered World War II. Being Japanese, I wonder how I would be treated. But things did not change much at school. Some of my good friends were big guys and they watched out for me. When Executive Order 9066 and Civilian Exclusion Order 79 were issued in 1942, people of Japanese ancestry were given 2 weeks to move outside the military exclusion zone or to be detained. We had no place to go, so we were forced to close the laundry, sell our possessions for pennies on a dollar, and enter detention. We could take with us only what we could carry. We left by train on May 22nd, 1942, not knowing where we were going or how long we would be gone. To my great surprise, my teacher brought my class to see me off. It was an emotional goodbye. In November 1945, after being incarcerated for 3.5 years in 2 California locations, we were released. We had nothing to return to Auburn, so we joined family in Spokane. Friends later urged us to come to California, and we moved to San Lorenzo in 1947. We started over again. I went to Hayward High School, served in the U.S. Army, married, had a satisfying career, and raised a family. The East Bay has been a good home.
My brother Hod. Haruo was one of my 5 brothers. 4 years my senior, Haruo was nicknamed Hod by his family and later Hell by his naval buddies. Even at a young age, Hod was curious, level-headed, and very funny, traits that earned him many friends. As a child, I remember a time when we were soaking in a furo, a Japanese bath, and Hod told me, "If you drink this water, you'll learn more Japanese." Of course, I believed him. Hod was a car lover and passionate about travel. He loved the open road and traveling by any means possible. After graduating from the University of California in 1957 and being drafted into the United States Navy, he continued his travel, only this time aboard a military aircraft. The Navy trained Hod as a navigator and an electrical engineer. Hod saw the world, and he even survived both Antarctica and Vietnam. Hod's wanderlust made our mother worry that he would never marry. But Hod met the love of his life, Grace Yoshida, and they married in 1966 and adopted a daughter, Anne. After serving in the Navy for 20 years and retiring as a lieutenant commander, Hod found ways to combine his 3 greatest loves: his family, travel, and food. Hod and Grace spent 2 months visiting regions of the South Pacific and Asia where he served, but never had the time to explore at leisure. He enjoyed papayas from Bora Bora, breadfruit from Rarotonga, and banquets in the style of an Indonesian rice table. Hod was a devout Christian. His relationship with the Holiness Church began soon after our family returned to the San Francisco Bay Area in the fall of 1945. We were among the 120,000 individuals of Japanese descent forcibly removed from our homes and incarcerated during World War II. It was an experience throughout which we were blameless and for which the United States later apologized. We committed no crimes and we were denied due process. Emancipated, homeless, and nearly destitute, we found refuge with other Japanese American families at the Eden Community Center in the rural community of San Lorenzo. The center, basically a wooden barn, served as a temporary shelter, and the recently released slept in open dormitories with a shared bathroom and a small kitchen. With a place to sleep, food to eat, and a supportive family, Hod started a new life with school and church at its foundation. The San Lorenzo Elementary School lay some 2 miles west of the center, and Hod trekked there to attend classes. On a country road 3/4 of a mile northwest of the elementary school stood a converted 2-story Victorian home that served as a Japanese Christian church. Hod felt a pull he could not explain and began attending services. It was a decision that forever enriched his life. Reverend Dan Shinoda made the Holiness Church a safe landing place, somewhere where returnees felt comfortable and comforted. Hod made lifelong friends with other youths like Roy Nishimura, Fred Shinoda, Joe Yobo Nishimura, Harry Kawahara. From his many new friends, he learned about places called Pinedale, Jerome, Manzanar, Minidoka, Tule Lake, Hart Mountain, Poston, Amachi. Though life's journey separated Hod from this church for well over 40 years, Hod was always drawn to the place that supported him during a dark period in his life. Just before he passed away at the age of 87 on November 19th, 2019, Hod expressed his final wish. He wanted his final memorial held at the San Lorenzo Holiness Church. He wanted to come home.
You know, it seems that bonsai have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My dad raised Japanese black pine in 15-gallon redwood tubs and gave them away as gifts to family and friends. My own interest in dwarf bonsai developed later in life while I worked as a part-time delivery driver for Frank Ogawa Nursery in Oakland. I actually started driving for Ogawas when I was in high school, and it continued into adulthood during my school breaks as a teacher. One customer I especially enjoyed seeing was Mr. Inadomi, a man of few words and the owner of Inadomi Nursery in Castro Valley. Mr. Inadomi was a master gardener, and occasionally I delivered azaleas and rhododendrons and fruit trees to him. I'd always take a few moments to admire the Japanese-style home on the nursery grounds. He had a koi pond and an extensive collection of dwarf bonsai. One tree held special interest for me. It was a kumquat. Kumquat is a fruit tree from Southeast Asia that was first described in Chinese literature about 1,000 years ago. I asked Mr. Inadomi about this particular tree, and he told me that it was about 30 years old and it had been featured on the cover of a bonsai magazine. From that day forward, I dreamed of growing another bonsai, one like that, and that dream would eventually come true. I bought books, I taught myself the essentials, and I purchased tools. Whenever I went to the Ogawa nursery to run my routes, I stopped by the nursery's recovery area, a place where plants in need of care were given extra attention. It was here that I found my starter trees. One day I found a kumquat. It had a lot of broken branches, and Frank allowed me to have it. With care, I pruned and shaped the damaged tree until it eventually grew into a lovely dwarf bonsai. It was about 12 inches tall with a 3-inch diameter pyramid-shaped base. When it bore fruit, the tiny golden kumquats were the size of peas. In the early 1960s, my father was diagnosed with late-stage colon cancer, and he underwent 2 surgeries followed by a series of radiation treatments. The family was worried his cancer treatments were not as effective as they are today, and survival rates were not good. During Papa's recovery, he drove his black Ford pickup truck from his home in San Leandro to my home in Fremont and cared for the 3 planted bonsai he gave to my family. When Papa's work was done, he watched as I worked on the kumquat tree. Papa and I had many conversations as I worked with the little tree, carefully shaping its branches with copper wire, trimming its delicate form and roots with my shears, and gently misting it with a spray bottle. The tree reminded me a lot of Papa. It had presence. It was sturdy and silently strong of character. You know, as the months went by, Papa grew steadily better. He lived another 20 years, and he enjoyed many experiences with his children and grandchildren and friends. But as Papa recovered, despite my best efforts, the little dwarf kumquat slowly withered and it died. I truly believe the kumquat died so that my father could live.
On May 22nd, 1942, my parents, 2 sisters, and I were uprooted from our home in Auburn, Washington, and put onto a train with hundreds of other men, women, and children of Japanese ancestry. The windows were covered, so we only saw daylight when we disembarked during rest stops. 1,000 miles later, we reached Fresno, California, and were greeted by a blast of Central Valley heat. From the train station, we were bused to Pinedale, a temporary detention center that housed 5,000 individuals. Upon arrival, we were given large white bags and told to fill them with straw to make our mattresses. I spent my 12th birthday at Pinedale, and on July 17th, 1942, we were taken by train to the volcanic basins at the California-Oregon border to the Tule Lake concentration camp. Tule Lake ultimately incarcerated nearly 19,000 individuals. Residential sections were organized into wards, blocks, and barracks. We lived in Ward 6, Block 49, Barrack 4, Unit E. Our address was 4904-E. Each block's common area included a mess hall where my parents were both cooks, laundry, latrines, showers, and a recreation building. Accommodations were rough and privacy was non-existent. The tar paper barracks were typically 20 foot by 120 foot and divided into 6 units using partitions 8 feet high. Neighboring voices were easily overheard. Each unit had a pot-belly coal stove and one bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. School and sports kept youngsters busy. We played baseball in the fire break and basketball in our common area. Before basketball games, we stomped down the loose soil to harden the surface so our ball would bounce. After school and other activities, children ate together instead of with their families. Shared meals were once the center of family life, and mothers worried that their children would become lost without lessons learned over the dinner table. When I was 14, I got a summer job transporting goods from the warehouse. My friends and I worked 8-hour days and earned $12 per month. One day, a typewriter fell off the truck and broke. We did not know what to do, but eventually fessed up. The camp atmosphere worsened dramatically when Tule Lake became a segregation center, a site where disaffected individuals from other camps were brought together. My friends heard that gangs were forming, so we joined a gang for protection. Fortunately, we never got into any fights. We left Tule Lake on November 15, 1945. Throughout those long years, my parents and many others embodied the Japanese spirit of gaman. They endured many hardships for the greater good. They believed that how we lived our lives in camp would affect how society would treat us after the war. Our community committed no wrong. Most of us were American citizens. We were denied due process before we were incarcerated. Decades later, our government investigated this wrongdoing, declared us innocent, and apologized. For many, the letter of apology help to ease the shame of being accused of disloyalty.
Every December, I waited for a specific phone call from my father. December 1981 was no exception. Papa and his friends kept close track of when the herring came to spawn in California's San Francisco Bay. When the time arrived, the news traveled fast, and I received my long-awaited call. It was easy to imagine the big smile that crossed on Papa's face as he spoke. His message was always simple and always the same. Tiburon Shores, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Tiburon lies on a peninsula just off the Richardson Bay arm of the San Francisco Bay. The rocky shoreline is rich with kelp that creates a natural habitat for a Pacific herring spawning ground. It is a place Papa, Mama, me and my family visited the last week of every year to collect kazunoko, or herring roe. Kazunoko is an important part of oseki, the traditional Japanese New Year's feast. The rose symbolizes a blessing, so a family may have many children. Mama's pre-outing routine was always the same. She woke up before dawn to prepare our bento lunches and made sure that we packed plenty of extra warm clothing. The sun was scarcely up when I gathered my parents into my car and drove across the San Rafael Bridge. The day promised to be typically clear, cold, and sunny, and the early morning views of the bay and surrounding hills were spectacular. My 74-year-old mother and soon-to-be 80-year-old father enjoyed every moment. Upon arrival, I changed into my wetsuit. I helped Papa into his hip waders and then secured a safety belt around Papa's chest. It was my job to stay between Papa and the deep water. Together, we slowly stepped onto the wet rocks, and with a firm grip on the safety belt, I watched as Papa reached into the chilly water to feel for the herring eggs. Sometimes as he worked, Papa told stories of how he and his father traveled to the eastern shores of Japan, north of Tokyo to Sendai, to gather kazunoko. Never so carefully, Papa pulled strands of kelp from the rocks and he handed them to me. They were beautiful bright green and lined with tiny pearls of roe. With equal care, I placed them in alternating layers into a bucket. Papa repeated these steps until the bucket was 3/4 full. No more. Our limit. We will leave the rest for the others, Papa said each time. Papa taught my siblings and me many valuable lessons through the small yet important acts like this. Cold, wet, and happy, Papa and I joined Mama, where she was seated on some rocks nearby. We opened our bento boxes, began our picnic with an expression of gratitude. Itadakimasu, bless this food and the hands that prepared it. Then we ate with enjoyment. Rice with a pickled plum in the middle, white with red like the Japanese flag. 4 pieces of teriyaki chicken, green broccoli, yellow pickled horseradish, red and white fish cakes, pink pickled ginger. All were carefully arranged like a box of bright jewels and accompanied by a thermos of hot tea. Sitting with my parents as we enjoyed our bento lunches, I looked over at Papa. He ate slowly and deliberately, and he had this faraway look in his eyes. I wished I could have read his mind at that moment. I did not know that would be our last trip together.
The kitchen stove. Our family's return to the San Francisco Bay Area after the end of World War II was like a story set in the Great Depression. We were broke and homeless, but where the storylines differ is that we were returning to a place in California where, only a few years earlier, we were established, contributing members of the community. We were among the 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry who were forcibly removed from our homes and wrongfully incarcerated. We were emancipated in the fall of 1945, and our family of 7 returned to rural San Lorenzo. We sheltered at the local Japanese community center before moving to a little rented home we once occupied. The house was ransacked and vandalized during our absence, but our dad utilized the carpentry skills he acquired during our incarceration and hastily patched the ruined structure. In 1946, we moved in. Our half-acre lot was sandwiched between the Western Pacific Railroad track and Hesperian Boulevard. On it sat an unpainted 800 square foot cabin, a one-car garage with a dirt floor, a bathhouse, and an outhouse. The cabin had 3 small bedrooms, a mini kitchen, a general living area. The bathhouse covered a redwood tub, 4 foot square, 3 foot deep, large enough for 2 small people. The enclosed outhouse was a wooden bench with 2 cutouts straddling an open pit. A stack of Montgomery Ward catalogs was our toilet paper. The house was heated by a small wood-burning stove that sat in the dining area. The floor of the furo, the Japanese bath, was sheet metal covered by a wooden grate to protect bathers from injury. Water was heated by a fire beneath the tub. We bathed twice a week, Japanese style, washing ourselves outside the tub and using the tub to soak and relax. For reasons unknown to me, I was never allowed to start the wood-burning stove in the house, but I was the chief fire builder for the furo. Those early days were difficult for everyone, most especially for our mother. Mama had pots and pans and dishes, but no working stove. Mama was adaptable and ingenious. She searched the property's junk heap and improvised a stove from an old wheel rim. She cleaned the rim thoroughly, turned it flat side up, built a fire in the center. When the coals are red hot, she gingerly balanced cookware atop the hot iron and hung more pots off the rim. The big pot of rice always received the most attention. Meals were typically rice and okazu, stir-fried, made with vegetables, freshly harvested from nearby farms and mixed with a little meat. The family was called to dinner at sunset. We sat and squatted around the makeshift stove and ate quietly while enjoying the warmth of the fire. The sight was likely reminiscent of a migrant farm worker family passing through town. Yet, despite the hardship, no one ever complained, not even Mama. Mama managed to prepare meals that satisfied everyone. It was true farm-to-table cooking, and the open fire flavored foods with rich, earthy smokiness. Eventually, modern conveniences made life more comfortable. A small 2-burner kerosene stove was purchased. The children grew old enough to help, and the heavy kitchen duties were lifted off of Mama's shoulder. But I have fond memories of that wheel rim, glowing red hot in the center, topped with pots full of basic nutritious food. The makeshift stove symbolized the time and place of a difficult period of our lives.
Thank you so much to our authors for participating in that video presentation of their readings. So now we're going to go into the question and answer portion of the program. If you have not already done so, go ahead and type your questions into chat. And we're going to be having with us Tak, Kix, and Naomi for questions today. So let's go ahead and get started. I know Naomi had some questions to start off the two brothers with. So Naomi, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Melissa. So, Tak, where do you find the inspiration for your stories?
Well, you always write about things you know about. And of course, my stories was about family and the doctor. And I knew quite a bit about all of them. But I get my inspiration from looking at people. And what I found was that every person has their own story. And as I guess I'm now the storyteller, it's my responsibility to find what that person has to say. I guess that's the art of it. So I guess that's the fun part of trying to dig out what is inside each person.
Well, you do a great job. Thank you for just being part of the process. It's just, well, for the viewers, you just have to know that I, as a workshop leader, have had more fun working with the group I call the boys than more than just about anything I've ever done. We spent a lot of time laughing, enjoying ourselves. Okay, Kix, your turn. Why did you get started, and how did you get started?
Well, I joined the group mainly because of Tak and Digger and Harry, because they're all older, and I knew that they would have stories. I don't have the stories because I was just a baby in camp. So I joined the group for that reason. I wanted to be a bystander and just listen. But of course, Naomi, you wouldn't let me get away with that. So you're the one that encouraged me to look into some of the things that I knew about. So mine's about rebuilding and recovery, but I hand it to you because you're the one that gave me the courage to do this.
Well, you're really, really good at it. You can tell from the comments coming in that people love your stories. So I also love it when people talk about being the baby of the group and you're 79 years old. So I think that's the wonders of being Nisei, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is I'm one of the youngest, Yeah. So, yeah.
So Tak, do you plan on continuing your writing? What are you thinking?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to continue to write, but I was inspired by someone that I watched on Zoom one day. The Eden Township sponsored a cook show, and they had lay people come on and demonstrate cooking techniques. And one person came on and he was demonstrating a dish called miso meatball soup with tofu. Now that's a basic food, country comfort food that my mother cooked. And this one person was going to demonstrate this, and I was really anxious to see how he was going to present this thing. And he gave us a preview of his recipe. And he started off with the 3 basic ingredients, miso, meat, and tofu. And then he added about 12 other ingredients on it, including chestnuts and mushrooms and soy sauce. But he started the program, the Zoom, and he put out a skillet and he threw in 2 pads of butter to brown his meat. And that just blew me away. I said, my mother never had butter, not in those days. We had something called margarine or oleo, whatever that was. And it was a block of white lard in a 1 pound block. And in the middle of it was a dye, a food coloring, yellow. So you could eat this lard, make believe it's butter, or squeeze this lard together, squeeze the coloring and make it look like butter and eat it. Either way, it tasted terrible. Anyway, I said, I got to write something about that. And I did.
Good for you. And we look forward to hearing the rest of that story. So one more question for Kix before I give it over to Melissa. So Kix, when you write, and truly these stories are just well received and welcomed by people of all ages. But do you have a particular audience in mind when you're writing?
Yeah, I did it mainly for my kids and my nieces and nephews that, they've never heard these stories before. I've never told them. So it's mainly for them, but I'm finding that there's a much larger audience out there.
They're here.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of my friends, they want to know.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. So for those of you that are looking for Digger, Digger had a power outage in his home this morning. So that's the reason he's not able to be part of the Q&A with us. Okay, Melissa, I'm going to give it back to you.
All right. So actually, we have questions in the chat for all three of you, but I'm going to start with Tak and Kix. So this question, this same question came from two different people. So the question is, everyone is really impressed with how much you were able to remember all this detail. Did you keep journals, or did you always write? How did each of you remember these things in order to tell these stories?
Just through my memories, really. I never kept a journal or anything, and I just I'm not just thinking back to it. You kind of remember details. You remember, like, I remember the smell of the herring roll, when I was picking it up, and just those kinds of things, allow me to kind of remember back, and it brings back the details to me.
Well, there are experiences in my life that bring me back to those old days. Now, that stove story, I go camping a lot. I go into the wilderness, and every time I start a fire in the wilderness to start my meals or meals for our family, that old wheel comes to mind. And I've been to Japan, of course, a number of times, and I've had baths at my uncle's house, and he had the same kind of bath that we had at the end of the war, that kind of thing, and the meatball tofu miso. That comes up all the time.
How can you?
How can you forget that one?
Oh, great. So also kind of staying on this theme of memories, another Naomi in the audience actually had the question, do you remember or know where the nursery in Castro Valley was located?
Yeah, it's right on the main drag, right on Castro Valley Boulevard. I think there's a Payless or something that's in that spot. Yeah, it was a very famous nursery.
Oh.
It was small but very famous. Yeah.
And then this question is actually for Tak. So Jessica said, Tak, my 6-year-old daughter Megumi just had a lot of work done on her teeth. You're wondering how your teeth are now.
To be honest with you, I don't own any of my back teeth anymore. Thanks to those defensive
Wow.
football players.
No, you have crowns.
Well, I have crowns and bridges.
And so this question now actually is for both of you, and it's on the topic of memory still, but in more of a legacy sense. So do you think that the spirit of gaman is something that would be helpful in today's society, or would you recommend a different approach?
No, I think it's so powerful. To me, it means to endure with dignity. And, I was too young to remember that experience. But those 8,000 people that were with me, they showed me what it was to instill that gaman. And so I have a tattoo.
Be careful, Talk. I mean,
I have this tattoo that says gaman, and it's not for me, it's for them, because they show me how to live. I got that on my 75th birthday.
Amazing. Talk, do you have any feelings on it? Or?
Well, there's actually a small traveling show of artwork that's called The Art of Gaman. And it demonstrates people's feelings through art, and shows resilience. It shows respect. Shows patience. And it's something that I hope my children and my grandchildren carry on.
Yep.
There's a whole book on gaman art. We have it.
Yeah, we all have it. I think we all have that spirit. That's what's important.
So our last two questions, I'm actually going to direct to Naomi. So we had a question from Vicky. So Vicky said, thank you. Personal question. I grew up in San Leandro, the generation of the 50s and 60s. I wonder if the Shibata family and San Leandro are related. I lost contact with my peer Ellen. Would love to reconnect.
Well, it's possible that you're talking. I found out there are a whole bunch of Naomi Shibatas, so I don't know how many Ellen Shibatas are. But I do have a first cousin named Ellen Shibata who was raised in San Leandro, and she's a physician. So Ellen's still in the Bay Area, so if you Google her, you can probably find her. Or if you can't do that, then get in touch with me later, and we'll figure out a way.
And one final question also related to legacy and storytelling, and I know this is a good one for Naomi. So this one came from Mary. Hearing Nisei men's stories are wonderful and familiar, but are there also female Nisei who are telling their stories?
Yes, it's coincidental that this team happened to be 4 men. And the other workshops that I've done, there's been an equal distribution between men and women. In fact, Ninja put out a publication a couple of years ago, a special edition, which had stories from a workshop that I did both in LA and in San Francisco, and their women authors featured there. So yes, women are welcome. It just so happened that this group happened to be guys.
And sorry, I take that back. There's one final question actually for Talking Kicks. Do you do readings for your communities? This question came from Mary. It sounds like you might have a whole schedule to fill now. The question is, do you do other readings?
Is that addressed to me, Melissa?
Oh, I think it's for Talking Kicks, but I mean, if you would be
I don't
organizing.
I don't. I've never written about these before, and I've never spoken about them. So I don't know. Maybe that's in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Neither have I. I've never.
But you
present. I do give classroom lectures on camp experiences to school kids. I was a pretty regular up in Portland. That's about it.
So Talk and I were on a conversation recently with another historical society, and we were invited to speak. And I hesitated because I wanted to check back with the other authors, but before I could finish or even start speaking, Talk agreed. So the answer is yes, we're getting invitations, and I think this particular group of people are open to receiving invitations and just opening a conversation and having a great dialogue.
So we are just a little bit past 12 o'clock now. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the program. But thank you so much, of course, to Talk, Kix, and Naomi for joining us today. We appreciate having you. We appreciate the time that we've been able to spend with you, getting to know you, and hope that, we'll be able to continue doing this in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming.
Thank you.
All right, so just before we close the program, we just have a few announcements and thank yous. Thank you to our funders, Grants for the Arts, San Francisco Japantown Foundation, the Henry and Tomoya Takahashi Charitable Foundation, and of course, a big thank you to our partners, the Hayward Area Historical Society. Again, acknowledgements here. Thanks to our authors, Kix, Talk, and Digger. Thanks to Diane and Marcès at the Hayward Area Historical Society. Thanks to, of course, to our team here at the National Japanese American Historical Society, with a special shout out to Naomi Shibata. And thank you also to the Umanclaw Plateau Historical Society, San Leandro Historical Society, San Leandro History Museum, San Lorenzo Japanese Christian Church, and the Dr. George Yamamoto family. Thank you so much for joining us today. That concludes our program. We hope to see you in future, possibly in person, as things move forward. Thank you.